Hey everybody, welcome to episode 9 of the Teal Teardown Hockey Podcast. I'm your host Dave, and wherever you are and whatever platform you're listening from, I just appreciate you joining me here today. So it's another wild week for the Sharks. They finally finished their long road trip and finished to top it off by playing at home. And not the greatest results. They were 1-2 this road trip, this week. They played Carolina on Tuesday. They lost with a pretty gutsy effort, 3-2 to a good team. They beat the Blues 4-3, which is another big deal. Even though the Blues are struggling this year, they were kind of on a hot streak since they hired Jim Montgomery a couple of weeks ago. So the fact that the Sharks were able to manage to beat them was kind of a big deal. And Utah was I would say a decent effort from the Sharks for the first two periods, and they kind of just coughed it up to Utah in the last bit. They lost 4-3. The Sharks definitely could have or should have won that one, but either way, the standings are what they are, and they lost 4-3 of that one. So overall, right now, the Sharks are 27th in the league, so they're pretty much hovering around the same area there because of the games in hand. Actually, they should be third last in points percentage, but here we are anyway. They're above Anaheim, Buffalo, Montreal, Chicago, and Nashville in terms of points. And we'll see how they go. They're probably just going to get another good draft pick this year, but at least they're fun to watch, and they can, they make you don't want to turn off their TV in the last minute of the game because they always have this chance where they can come back. They give you that hope, So there's always that positivity for this year anyway. In terms of the stats, Granlund is still first place. He's the only guy who's over a point a game, who's played a lot of games, at least over 30 games. He's got 32 points in 31 games. He continues to be just a clutch player for the Sharks. I can't imagine what we'd be without him right now. I mean, Celebrini would be talked about a lot as this young kid, but Granlund's just been that solid veteran who's been able to put up points, and he's been amazing. Second place has been Eklund, who's having his coming out party this season. He's got 25 points in 32 games. He's been just really good addition to the puck, and he's found that office behind the net. I love seeing him do these little slippery tricks, getting behind the net and making some backhand passes. And he just has a lot more grit, a lot more heart, just his confidence in his game that we haven't seen from him before this year. But yeah, he's second place, and of course, third place is still Jake Wallman, our stud defenseman, all-around guy who we got for they gave him away to us for everything. He's been absolutely lights out solid for us. And fourth place, Fabian Zetterlund, is 22 points in 33 games. He was a little bit cold the last couple of games. He finally got the monkey off his back and scored a nice goal, his 10th goal of the season. And fifth place, climbing the ranks slowly, Macklin Celebrini. He's got 20 points in 21 games, almost a point a game. And what can I tell? Every week I talk about him. It seems like we're always gushing about something he can do, and he just does everything right on the ice. He's a real leader out there. The way he just talks to the refs, when a bad call happens or if they miss a call, he's the first one to be talking to the refs and explaining what's going on. He seems like a very passionate guy on the ice, and just he's a warrior out there. And I bet you his teammates love him. Sixth place, Tyler Toffoli, who's got 33 games and 20 points in 33 games, 12 goals and 8 assists. And even though he's not the points aren't as high as Granlund, he's not as there as much. He has been a really solid player for the Sharks. He's going to all the right places. He's always in front of the net in the dirty areas. He's slippery, he's sneaky. He has a very high IQ of where to be offensively. He's just been a really solid guy for the Sharks in the top six. And seventh place is Alexander Wenberg, 16 points, 33 games. He's been a kind of a clutch, underrated guy. He gets the odd goal here and there that makes you think he has more points. Every time I look at his stats, I'm like, does he have more goals? I thought he was doing a lot better than this, but he's always been good places on the ice, and nothing bad to say about him. And finally, Luke Cunnin, 12 points in 33 games. He's been pretty solid the last little while. He actually got rewarded against St. Louis. He was rewarded to play on the first line with Celebrini. He's been really good. Warsofsky's been gushing about him. He's a really good locker room guy, apparently. He gets the points in the right places, and he does the right things. He back checks. He finishes checks. He digs for loose pucks. He goes in the dirty areas. He does everything a type of player you would want in a Stanley Cup winning team as your depth guy to do all those kinds of things. But because the Sharks are the Sharks, he can throw them on the first line and kind of reward them for things like that. So yeah, that's how the Sharks are. State of the Sharks right now as of this week. They're pretty much just middling right now. They're losing games against teams that they should be losing to anyway because there's just teams that are better. There is obviously work to be done in terms of things they could do because they should have beaten Utah. The gutsy effort against St. Louis was very nice to see because St. Louis had their number, beginning of this season, and I think that they beat them again as well, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, they beat them 3-2 November 21st, and they handily beat them in the season opener 5-4. So St. Louis had their number, but until on Thursday night. So yeah, that's pretty much the state of the Sharks here. So in the news, we had one big trade that happened, the inevitable Blackwood trade that we were talking about all season long. He was playing absolutely phenomenal for the Sharks and bailing him out. And honestly, there are games the Sharks probably could have lost if it wasn't for him. And the games the Sharks could have actually been blown out worse than they were if it wasn't for him. So his stock was very high. A lot of teams were interested in him apparently. The two that were the most interested I heard were obviously Colorado Avalanche and the Carolina Hurricanes. So both those guys had a chance to make their bids to GM Mike Grier, and it looks like Colorado had the better sweetener, so Grier ended up actually going with what they had. So here's what happened in the trade, or here's what the details of the trade are. So Sharks got Alexander Georgiev, Nikolai Kovalenko, a second-round pick in 2026, and a conditional 2025 fifth-round pick. And Avalanche, they would get basically Mackenzie Blackwood would be the sweetener of the deal, obviously the most important part of the deal. They got Giovanni Smith and a 2027 fifth-round pick. So this is why before this trade happened, the Sharks put Giovanni Smith on waivers. That way he would go into the AHL, and by being able to trade him to Colorado, now that he's been cleared the waivers, Colorado can keep him in the AHL without having to put him through waivers through their system. So they have an extra guy. He's tough. Just a good depth guy to have in certain tougher teams. And now that I think if he's been put on through waivers once, he clears it, that Colorado can do that again without having to worry about putting him on waivers when they bring him up inevitably throughout later the year. So yeah, the most important thing for them obviously was Mackenzie Blackwood. I mean, you could say that it was kind of an underwhelming return if you waited till the end of the trade deadline when players usually be more expensive. You usually expect maybe we could have gotten maybe a first for Blackwood. Who knows, honestly, what kinds of deals Grier was getting because he's playing so good. But at the same time, if he's hot right now, he's playing so well, and the Sharks are just a team that's in the bottom basement. They could make him look bad in a few weeks, in a few months maybe. So maybe this is the best time to do it. So I can't really blame Grier. He's always feels like every time he makes these trades, it seems underwhelming at the time. But then later down the road, you're like, okay, this was a brilliant trade. The big one for me is the Hurdle trade. It felt underwhelming to get all the pieces we got back, but all those pieces they end up getting, he traded them away to get Askarov. So I couldn't complain about that. And even for the Meyer trade, we got a couple of firsts and Fabian Zetterlund. Who is this kid? And now he's one of our best power forwards right now that's still kind of figuring things out because he's young. So I can't blame Mike Grier for this choice that he made because honestly, the star of this trade, in my opinion, is Nikolai Kovalenko. He's only played 3 games for the Sharks already, and he's been pretty amazing. Not to mention that one game we're going to talk about for St. Louis, we had 3 assists. He had 1 assist. That was a beautiful pass to Zetterlund yesterday that got Zetterlund's monkey off his back, his goal-scoring drought. So nothing to complain about that. Also Colorado did retain a little bit of Georgiev's contract, which the Sharks said is kind of weird. Doesn't really matter. It's only about $476,000 off. So I don't know. I guess it was just kind of a within the trade to move some money around for some reason. But really, the Sharks are not in cap trouble. Maybe it was an actual physical money reason. But So he was making $10.2 million in terms of 3-year contract. So it was about 3-point-something million contract for Georgiev, so nothing crazy. But so the Sharks retain that, but I think the star of that deal was Kovalenko and that second round pick, which can be very, very nice to get. Just more players in the cupboard for Grier to kind of grow, develop, and maybe trade in the future when the Sharks are contenders. Who knows what he's going to do with those picks, because he does pretty good magic with that stuff. So let's go with break down Kovalenko first. Actually, no, I'll break down Georgiev first because he's been in the league for a while. He was just more of a guy. It's going to be a stopgap guy. His contract ends this year. He's making $3.4 million this year, and some salaries retained. 28 years old. He was for a little short time, and early in his career when he was the backup for Lundqvist for the Rangers, he did have this hype about him. People thought he was the next big thing. He was pretty decent. He had some really good stats back when he played for the Rangers, but he would end up being traded to Colorado in 2022, and kind of okay, nothing crazy. He did play in the playoffs for New York Rangers 21-22. For 2 games, he was 0-1 though, so he just set in for 1 game. He came in for 1 game. The best round he had with Colorado was in 23-24. He was 6-5. So he did manage to get through one round, but then obviously they got beat. He had 897 save percentage, nothing crazy. So he's been in the playoffs for 3 years, and this year in Colorado he was kind of didn't do very well. He did start to kind of play a little bit better over the last few weeks when Colorado started to play better. But yeah, Colorado just ended up trading him because they needed that goalie space. And I think the Sharks, what they're going to do is either trade Georgiev or Vanacek by the end of the season and maybe bring up Askarov. Or maybe they'll just keep him until the end of the year because the plan is for sure Askarov next year will be the full-time goalie for the Sharks. But right now, it's just with the Barracuda being a team that can actually contend for a Calder Cup, he might be better to stay there just this year. We'll see. So yeah, Georgiev's just a good, stopgap for that while the Sharks kind of continue their tank season, as much as people hate to say it. But yeah, Georgiev, nothing crazy, nothing of a great goalie. He's a decent backup. I think he played pretty well against St. Louis. He got his first win for the Sharks. He was okay. I don't think he's going to be anything special. He's not going to be terrible. I think the Sharks are going to be as bad as they are with or without him in net. We're just not going to have that kind of goalie anymore that's like, as good as Blackwood is, maybe he's hurting the tank too much because he can steal some wins for us, and we want to be as bad as possible to get another good pick this year because we're already there's no chance, like we can make the playoffs, but there's really no reason to try and push it or anything like that this year. But Kovalenko, on the other hand, now he's a good pickup. I want to talk about him because he's pretty young. Like, he's 25 years old. He's at that point now where you know what he is. He's not going to get any, he might have a career year sometime in the future, but he's not going to get, insanely better. We're not going to expect another Celebrini or anything like that. But for the stuff that he does, I'm very impressed. He's already a very mature player. He does all the right things. He goes to the boards, the corners. He'll fight for the puck. He does seem to have very good hockey awareness with those assists he made, are very, very, high end, to the point where Warsofsky has let him play in the first line the last 2 games, and he's pretty much shown he's rewarded Warsofsky for his decision there. So I like his game. He's a little bit tough player. He's a smart player, and maybe if the Sharks are a good team, if we can keep him after this year, maybe he can be one of those guys. By the way, he is an RFA, so the Sharks do have the ability to not have to. He's not a UFA afterwards, basically, so they can keep him or sign him. They still have his rights for a little bit of a longer time. So this was obviously a good pickup as well. But yeah, I think he's a really good player, and we'll see how he goes. And when the Sharks are a good team, maybe he's going to be a good depth kind of a guy, a third-line guy. I don't see him as a top 6 per se, but right now where the Sharks are, it can't hurt to have him up there. He was kind of buried in Colorado's depth charts. He wasn't really getting as much ice time, and with the Sharks, they're giving him as much as he can. So yeah, he's doing really well. So his best season was actually this year. He's played 28 games. He's got 8 points in 28 games, 4 goals, 4 assists for Colorado. And then he joined the Sharks for those 2 games. And he has, he's 3 games, and he has 4 points in 3 games, which is that 1 3-assist game. And then yesterday he had 1 point. So he's been very, very good so far, and I like to see more what he can do. So looking back, yeah, this just with this trade alone, I think it's good in the long run. It seems kind of underwhelming because we probably rated Blackwood a little too highly based on how well he's played for the Sharks and bailed us out. But I do think that this is still a win for the Sharks. We're getting a couple of picks. We got a young-ish prospect, not a prospect, but a young guy that can play with the team and grow with the team if we end up keeping him longer with that contract rights with him. And Georgiev's just a stopgap goalie that can help with the tank. So, nothing terrible there. Blackwood, good luck to him. I hope he can win a cup with Colorado because he's been awesome. Basically, I really grew a lot of respect for him, and considering that the Sharks got him for a 5th round pick, I think, from New Jersey, because he was in it. He had a lot of injuries, and he was another up and comer for Jersey. I remember there was a big deal, and he had some really great games. He was supposed to be their new stud goalie, and then things just didn't end up working out well, and they ended up trading him away. And yeah, just another guy Wallman, where Sharks got him for pretty much nothing, and we made something of him. We ended up turning him around, getting a good player and a couple of picks, and yeah, so that's always been the great thing. So out of this trade, I'd probably give Mike Greer probably a B+, just because I don't know what the real value of Blackwood would be if we waited longer. Maybe by the trade deadline there'd be more desperate suitors, but then again, the Sharks might have been worse, and Blackwood stats could have dropped even worse, and he would have gotten nothing. So Greer felt he could sell him right now at the highest price, and considering we got a second and this Kovalenko kid, I'm going to consider a pretty decent win. So yeah, the Sharks, good move, Greer, and looking forward to seeing what's going to happen with all the picks. All right, let's tear into the game, starting with the Carolina Hurricanes and the San Jose Sharks on Tuesday. The Sharks are visiting, and they're on their road trip, second last road trip game, so they're a little bit road weary. And the Carolina Hurricanes are a good team. Like, that's a team you have to be awake for. And the Sharks did play up to that billing at least. They were actually didn't play too bad. They actually had a lead for a good half of the game, and then they ended up kind of blowing in the third. Carolina kind of turned it on after that, but just in the first period alone, the Carolina did spend a lot of time in the Sharks zone, but the Sharks seemed to hold their own, and the shots were relatively 50-50 even by the end of the first, I would say, before Carolina obviously turned it on. But but the one problem, Gostisbehere did score like really early in the game. About the first 5 minutes. It wasn't like the first 2 minutes. Like sometimes you see the Sharks kind of blow it and not really be ready. But Gostisbehere would get a goal. It was a nice, he pinches up just a little bit and snipes it from the top hash marks of the left circle. So he was, it was not a good start for the Sharks there. Burns ended up blocking a shot from Wallman, and he actually went to the back to get checked on for a bit, but he would come out later. But near the end of the first period, Cunnin would score his first goal and be a 1-1 tie. It was kind of a lucky one. He went to shoot it, and it bounced off the legs of some Carolina player. So Kochetkov was already kind of down and ready for that shot. So by the time he got up to readjust, Cunnin would get off his second shot from the rebound, and I'd go 5-hole. So that would be 1-1 leading to going to the second period. And just at that first period, most of Carolina. The Sharks held on, and Vanacek was actually pretty brilliant, to be honest. Celebrini, I noted that he was just being a magician. He did some crazy stuff out there. He deked out 2 Carolina guys from the Sharks zone, and then he took the puck all the way to the Carolina zone while doing that. Just the confidence of this kid is unfreaking believable. But that was pretty much mostly of what happened in the first period. In the second period, there'd be a lot of penalties in the beginning. Kotkaniemi would get a holding call against Toffoli, but Carolina would kill it. Ruda would get called for a slashing. It was obviously another soft slash, but the refs called it. They're calling these soft ones all year, it seems like. So at least I'll give credit to the refs for consistency, even though the slash is pretty much garbage and nothing. But then a minute later, Svechnikov would actually get a slashing call too for Carolina. Obviously it's 50-50 anyway, so it'd be 4-4 for a bit. So there'd be a 2-on-1 chance, and Celebrini would give it to Eklund, but they took too long to make a play. They're kind of taking their time to figure out the perfect shot or make a wait for a pass, so it ended up being saved. Vanacek robbed Marknook during the breakaway. This is all that happened during that 4-on-4. The Sharks were taking too long with good looks on net, and just were holding on to the puck for too long during that whole time. They had possession, but they weren't doing anything with it. But a little bit after that, Cunnin would get his second goal. Now, this was a really nice playoff from William Eklund from his office. So someone dumps the puck down, and Eklund went to go to the corner to get it, and he was battling another Carolina guy. He ends up winning the puck and then skating behind the net, and then he finds Cunnin, who's just right by the edge of the net, and he pretends to go around it, but he passes to Cunnin last minute as he goes to the other net, and Kochetkov was kind of expecting like a wraparound, so he kind of is a little bit off balance, so Cunnin has a wide open, not a wide open net, but a good amount to get in. And so it would be up 2-1 for the Sharks, and this would be the Sharks holding the lead against Carolina, which is a big deal considering how good Carolina is. But then Kostin would get a penalty a little bit afterwards, but San Jose would kill the penalty. So this is another cool play from Celebrini, because obviously there's going to be a lot of these every time you watch a game, but Celebrini got hit on the boards, and he fell forwards, and Toffoli was sitting in front of the net, basically waiting for a pass. As Celebrini fell, he flicked it perfectly to Toffoli's stick, and Toffoli got shot on net for a play that looked completely hopeless. You'd think Carolina would just pick up the puck and just start off there with Red Rush, but no, Celebrini just doesn't give up and makes a perfect pass. Like, not only does he not give up, but the freaking play was like an all-star play already. So, nothing happened to that, though. So that would be the second period. In the third period, it was basically the Sharks' best period since the Washington game, but Carolina did obviously outplay them in the end, because Carolina just turned the Jets on. They were down, and Burns would end up scoring a goal. He had a pretty smart play. Burns was in the defensive zone, and he snuck all the way. He skated really far and joined the play, and he snuck all the way in front of the net and passed him by a bunch of Sharks, and no Sharks were covering him, and he just kind of just passed to him perfectly, and he had a nice open net to shoot at. For a big guy, I'm surprised the Sharks missed him, though, because he's not very fast either, so I don't know how he slipped by all of them, but he ended up scoring that goal, so it would be 2-2 after that, and Chatfield would score near the end of the period, near the end of the game, make it 3-2. Sharks lose the face-off, they can't clear the puck, and then basically it was just a bad Sharks icing that led to that goal. Not the greatest thing. The Sharks would call a timeout, 1 minute, 25 seconds left. 6-on-5, there was great cycling. Foley does end up getting a shot on goal, but in the end, Sharks lose 3-2 to the Hurricanes. Carolina just ended up dominating in the third. The Sharks held their own a little bit. They weren't really on their heels, but Carolina was just the better team in the end. Sharks did have a good second period. They held the lead for at least 15 minutes of the game, but they ended up couldn't do anything with it. But yeah, the Sharks, and overall, because of how good Carolina is, I would not consider it a terrible loss, but it was, there was a lead that they had. They did end up blowing a bit. They could have maybe held on to it, but this is something I keep reiterating. They need to learn how to do this. It's good that they're getting these leads. Maybe the next year is the time when they need to really figure out, they're getting older. The young kids are getting older and more mature, how to keep the leads, how to, not turtle too much that you're giving them too much space, but also not like to be too aggressive and pinching and stuff, which honestly isn't the Sharks' problem. Their problem is actually the first part. They're turtle too much. They really collapse a lot and they end up like giving the other teams too much space to make moves. So that's the kind of thing I find there. So game stats. Carolina outshot the Sharks 28-23. Faceoffs were in the Sharks' favor for 55.8% of the faceoffs were won by the Sharks. The penalty minutes were 4 penalties for the Sharks and 3 penalties for Carolina. The Sharks out-hit Carolina 34-31. The block shots were even at 19. Sharks only had 2 more giveaways in Carolina from 17-15. And the takeaways, they also had 8. The Sharks had 8 to 6 takeaways. So that was their first meeting of the season. They will have a rematch in San Jose on March 20th. Okay, moving on to the Thursday game where the Sharks are visiting St. Louis. It was their last stop of their road trip. They played a lot. They must have been very tired, and they're happy to put that behind them. So this would be Game 32 on Thursday night. And a couple of pregame notes. Shakir Mukhamadullin was making his Sharks debut for the season. He was injured earlier this year, if you recall, and then once he got better, he played for the Barracuda for a couple of weeks just on a conditioning stint to see, get him back to game speed. It was also Georgiev's first game since the Shark trade for Blackwood to the Colorado Avalanche. And Eklund was also demoted to the 4th line in this game because Warsofsky just felt like he wasn't giving enough. But during the game, he would slowly play so well that he would actually earn his spot back up at the top 2 lines. Warsofsky was saying he didn't play with intensity the last couple of games, so he wanted to give him a little bit of wake-up call, a little punishment. And Kovalenko was rewarded after his first game. He had, I believe, 3 hits against Carolina. So he actually was on the line with Celebrini and Toffoli, which is, the good things would come from that. So let's start getting to the game. So the Sharks actually would end up scoring a goal relatively quickly. It was a Toffoli shot. Again, it just from Celebrini and Kovalenko. So Kovalenko would be battling in the boards. He'd flick the puck up in the air, and Celebrini would bat it down in front of the net. And there'd be a little bit of a scrum, and Toffoli would pick up the garbage and just put it in the net. So this is the kind of stuff I like about Toffoli. Like, he just has that awareness. He's in front of the net. He's a brave guy. He's not afraid to do that kind of stuff. And he's just such an unsung hero. Like, he's not going to be getting a point a game. He's not that guy anymore. He's a little bit older. But just the things he does where he's just so... His IQ is still so high in that he does things like that. Him and Celebrini seem to have great chemistry. And Kovalenko, obviously, on that line, just a guy who's going to do all the dirty work and pick up the garbage in the corners. It was a very, very good play, and you could see that chemistry working out really well. So this also started off from a Binnington giveaway, too. He went behind the net, almost like Askarov a few weeks ago, where he went behind the net, tried to play the puck, and then Kovalenko would pick it up and intercept it. So that was really nice. A little bit after that, Dellandrea and Walker would fight. Dellandrea would take a hit and Walker would Dellandrea would make a hit, and it was a clean hit. I don't know why, but this is the new NHL. Walker took offense to that, and they decided to fight. It was a good long fight, but Delandrea's helmet fell off like halfway through it, so it felt like Walker was getting a few good easy shots in the helmet. This is something that kind of really bugs me. I know that the NHL wants to stop like head injuries, and they fall on their heads. There's a risk of doing some damage, but I think that if you're not allowed to take off your helmet, like, you're just going to break your hand, and you're allowing the other guy to kind of do his work at you if it just manages to fall there, because you're not purposely trying to get the other guy's helmet off. You're kind of just trying to protect yourself, and Dellandrea is kind of just open for those shots, and meanwhile the guy's helmet's on, and Landry's trying to catch his footing back on the ice, and it just wasn't working out well. But it was a good fight in the end. I'd say it was a 50-50 fight, but I just didn't like that at the end there. So right after that, Neighbors tied the game 1-1. He sniped it from the hash marks. He kind of caught Liljegren kind of turning a little bit, so he wasn't perfectly ready to box Neighbors out, and then he just sniped it up there, so that's how that went in. Then right after that, Neighbors would actually get a penalty for holding Celebrini, and Blues would end up killing that penalty anyway. Then Dellandrea would get a call for hooking. It was another soft call, but this is just how it is. And that would be the end of this first period. So it ended up being 1-1, and the penalty that Landry got would carry over to the second period. The Sharks were playing with grit. That's the one thing I really noticed in this game, is that St. Louis is the type of team, they're going to push you around to try and bully you. But the San Jose Sharks were able to stand up for themselves and each other. Even Celebrini was getting in there. He's not afraid to get mixed up with some of these guys. So just credit to the Sharks, because they're a young team, but they're still holding on their way. And Dellandrea was like the leader in the terms of that, like that grit and toughness, getting that fight, getting his team worked up, and he was defending some guys. He's doing why the Sharks got him. Like he has some skill here and there, but he's really just a tough guy. He's a small dude, but he's got a big heart. And yeah, I just love the way he was playing there. So in the second period, Celebrini would end up getting a goal. It was kind of a lucky one. It wasn't like crazy, but the breakout pass by Liljegren was very nice from the San Jose Sharks zone. Celebrini would take it up, and Perico would kind of would go down and dive like a Mario Ferreira style, completely flat on the ice. And Celebrini would shoot it, bounces off Perico's leg, comes back to Celebrini, and Binnington was expecting a passer, so he moved out of the way, and Celebrini had a nice open shot to score. So it was a decent 2-on-1, but they overpassed it, and Kostin and Granlund. Granlund should have shot it, but he ended up trying to pass it to Kostin, so that was after that goal. And then a penalty, Ruda would get an interference call. He would interfere with Jake Neighbors. During that penalty, Becklund would have a great interception pass. He had a breakaway, but he ended up not getting the goal. And then there'd be a couple more penalties. Roughing, Kostin and Holloway would kind of get into it. But Holloway would get the extra 2 minutes, and the Sharks would have a power play for that time. And Celebrini would get a power play goal from Granlund and Wallman. It was a really nice shot. Like, he had a little bit of space. He went to shoot it, and he fakes Binnington, and the defenseman was trying to use his stick to try and get the puck. So Celebrini kind of pulls the puck back before he fakes the shot, and then Binnington kind of bid a little bit and expected a pass. He gave an open net for Celebrini, and even though it was a little bit of net, it was enough for Celebrini to score. This kid's just unfreaking believable. So that'd be the end of the second period. The Sharks would be up 3-1 against the St. Louis Blues, which is a big deal. The Sharks having trouble, closing out games. This would be a big test for them. The Sharks were out shooting St. Louis during that time, and they were just not afraid to be gritty. That whole second period, the whole first period, they're standing up for each other. And like I said, Dellandrea was leading the way for that. And even like Kostin, making sure that his guys weren't being messed with. He was able to get a roughing call to try and stand up for his guys. So period 3 starts. The first thing that happens is 6 minutes in, Braden Shen would score and make it 3-2. San Jose would turn it over on their end. And then Georgiev was a little bit out of his net. And then there'd be a kind of chaos going around passes. So Shen had kind of an open net to shoot at. Georgiev was pinching a little too high. But a little bit after that, Wallman would score from Kovalenko. It would be a 2-on-1, and it was a really pretty pass from Kovalenko. Like, he kind of stopped out of nowhere, a little bit of patience, and then he just flicks the puck over the defender and then right perfectly into Wallman's stick to an open net. It was just really, really nice, and that was Kovalenko's third assist of the game. Like, this kid is just like he's not going to be getting those kinds of points every night, but he was very, very nice coming out party for his second game as a Shark. And then right after that, Kyrou would end up scoring. St. Louis would be cycling, and Kyrou scored with the chaos in the net. Nothing too crazy there, but they would be 4-3. Sharks would end up holding on after the Blues pull Binnington. Sharks would get a little bit of possession, and they would just kind of dump the puck. Binnington leaves. This was before Binnington got pulled, actually, because the Sharks were holding on to make sure that the Blues couldn't pull Binnington, but they ended up doing that anyway. But then Busnevich would hit the post with the open net for St. Louis, but it ended up being Sharks would hold on, and they would end up winning 4-3. Just a crazy game. Celebrini had 3 assists, and I believe that when it comes to the Blues, Celebrini's just like the Blues killer. He's had 7 points in the 3 games against the Blues this season, 3 goals and 4 assists. Just in comparison, he has 12 points against the other teams in 17 games, the rest of the league. So with his 19 points during that game, he became a special group like of 18-year-olds, maybe the 11th 18-year-old player in history to get that many points in 20 career games. So he's already with names like Sidney Crosby, Patrick Kane, even Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, who had a good rookie year as well. So just a really gutsy effort from the Sharks against St. Louis. They could stand up for themselves. They played against these bullies, and they ended up winning the game, which is fantastic. And getting a win for Georgiev, his first game with his new team, it was a really, really great effort all around. Kovalenko, 3 points, obviously. That was freaking fantastic. And In terms of the shots on goal, the Sharks outshot the Blues 31-20. The faceoffs were 50-50. The Sharks would make good with one of their power plays. They scored one of the 2 power plays they had, while the Blues had 2 power play chances and didn't score on any of them. The penalty minutes were 11-11 each. And the hits were 32-31 for San Jose. San Jose with 21 block shots to 14. Again, the heart in this game. They played a really good. Although near the end they're kind of giving up goals to the St. Louis kind of made it close and made it a little nervous, but they ended up having that kind of gritty effort, gutsy effort, blocking shots, 21-14, and giveaways were 16 for St. Louis to 15 to the San Jose. And this is an insane stat. The takeaways were 12 for the San Jose to 2 for St. Louis, and I can already count the one for the one where the Binnington gave up to Kovalenko right in the beginning of the game. So that was definitely one that was they probably want back. That was a terrible giveaway there. All right, the final game of the week, San Jose would finally return home after a long road trip. They would be facing the Utah Hockey Club. And a couple of pregame notes, Will Smith was back from IR. He missed about a week of time, a little bit over a week with an injury that was nagging him, and the Sharks were very careful with him and let him to, take his time to heal. Kovalenko would be on the second line with Celebrini to Foley, so there was a little bit of rearrange, but really it could be the first line too with both the Zetterlund line and Eklund line and them, so it goes back and forth a little bit. But in this case, actually, Zetterlund was in the fourth line, so it was actually Eklund and Wenberg, and I believe Cunnin was in the first line there. But yeah, so Eklund would be back with Granlund, and Zetterlund would be on the fourth line. He was kind of getting punished. He had he's been kind of cold lately, but we'll move forward because he kind of got the monkey off his back in this game. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, those are the two kind of things I want to bring up there. But Kovalenko being on with Celebrini because he played so well in St. Louis, it makes sense to keep him up there, and he definitely deserved it. So in the first period, Utah is in San Jose's zone for most of the beginning of the game, but Vanacek is actually holding him up pretty well. Valimaki would get a penalty for holding the stick, and it was kind of a weird thing. We just held it for too long, so it didn't be called interference, but he was holding somebody's stick. And a little bit later, Utah would kill the penalty, but Genther would make it 1-0 Utah a little bit later. Sharks were, in my opinion, collapsing way too low in the net again, which is something they do way too much, giving so much space for Genther to kind of get up in front of the hash marks. He had a wide open shot in the slot. Someone passed to him, and he ended up scoring that goal. Wenberg blocked a piece of it, but it went off of him and went in the net. So then Cunnin would get a penalty a little bit after for holding Vilimaki's stick. Sorry. And Sharks would kill that penalty. And a little bit later, Wenberg would score. He sniped it from the top circle, top corner, which is a very nice play. Just the type of goals you see him, you look at his points, you think he should be getting more stuff, in my opinion. He should have more than 8 goals, but then, when he does stuff like this, it blows my mind. But yeah, he does stuff like that all the time. But so a little bit after that, there was a double roughing call. So Eklund and Cooley would kind of just give each other the business. So it'd be 4-on-4 for 2 minutes. And then a little bit after that, Zellerin had a break, but it was stopped. And then Cunnin would get a penalty for holding Cole, but San Jose would kill that penalty. And then Liljegren would get another penalty because San Jose honestly had a lot of penalty trouble this game. I don't know what it was. Some of them were soft, but most of them were just discipline issues that they could have done a little bit better. Liljegren got a stick between Keller's legs and he kind of fell, so there's nothing you could hide. You can't hide that kind of a penalty. So, San Jose would kill the penalty up, but that was a pretty bad trip. Celebrini gets hit and falls face first into the boards. No call, and the San Jose Sharks fans are just livid about that because it was it was a very dangerous play. I forgot who it was, but he basically cross-checked not cross-checked, but he pushed Celebrini, who had he was a little bit off balance. He was far enough for the boards as his face hit it. And yeah, Celebrini was really pissed about that. And this is one thing I really like about him too. He's a first-year kid, but he's not afraid to get in the refs' faces and give him the business for for bad calls like that, right? So, but Celebrini would be okay. He ended up getting up and still playing, and he finished the shift. And then after the whistle, that's when he went to the refs to complain. Utah was just really feisty in this first period, and after that, there was a little bit of a scrum. So penalty would get a penalty a little. Sturm would get a penalty a little bit later, hooking for right at the end of the period, and then Schmaltz would get a power play goal just before the period ends, making a 2-2 tie. So the third period would start. There'd be more penalty trouble for the Sharks. Granlund got a high stick on Keller. San Jose kills it, but then Oli Mata would get a penalty for Utah, and Zetterlund would score. Now this was a great pass. Kovalenko was on the other side of the net, and he just had a little bit of patience, skated up a little bit slowly, and Zetterlund was just in the back door waiting for the pass, and it was a beautiful pass across the ice to him, and Zetterlund would snipe in an open net. But the San Jose could not hold on. Carconi would score a little bit later. He kind of was slippery. He stayed behind the net, and the Sharks were so focused on everyone in front that they didn't see him slip behind and get to the other side. And he got a right back door, wide open net, kind of like Zetterlund, except this Carconi kid was a lot more slippery. So the Sharks are on their heels during this time. Utah's all over them, and Vanecek's bailing them out. Basically, there was a big brawl on the ice near the end of the period. It was very heated between everybody. Everyone's just getting into it. Both teams, even Celebrini was involved. And then what would happen out of that is McBain and Ruda would each get an offset roughing call against each other. But then a little bit later, CC would get a high sticking call. Now, it was kind of barely hit the guy's helmet, but for some reason they're going to call that kind of stuff, which is, I think it bothers me a lot that something like that would happen. But yeah, so that was a call. CC goes in the box with 57 seconds left, and 14 seconds later, Clayton Keller from Sergachev would score. He was a beautiful, patient play. No one attacking Keller. He's kind of slipping around. Sergachev passes to him. Ferraro tried to block the shot, but Keller would snipe it top corner, making it 4-3, and Utah would win. Vanecek would be pulled, and Celebrini would have a face-off as soon as in the offensive zone, which is when they pulled Vanecek, and Celebrini was actually pushed into the ref's legs. It looked like he was hurt, shaken up a bit, but he would still play on the ice. He still stayed out there after like a little bit of a break, him shaking it off. But the Sharks would end up losing. It would be too little too late with their pressure, and the Utah Hockey Club would win 4-3. So that was the games for the week. Let's just quickly check out the stats for the game. So Utah would outshoot the Sharks 40-22. They were really pushing at the end of the third period there. So the Sharks also were not getting the faceoff dot. They only had 48% versus Utah at 51.6%. Their power plays were dead even, 33% each. But the Sharks had 1 in 3 chances. They scored 1 out of 3 power play chances. But they gave a lot of power plays to Utah. There's a lot of problems here. Like I said, some were soft, like that high sticking thing, but there's things that keep your stick down. Like these are rules now that we know they're going to call even soft ones, so you have to be very careful with your stick. So the Sharks would actually give up 10 penalties, and Utah would score on 2 of them. So you could say that really the reason that the Sharks lost, if you take away a lot of those penalties, Sharks could have actually ended up winning 3-2 instead of losing 4-3. So yeah, there's that. So the penalty minutes were actually 16 minutes for the Sharks to 10 for Utah. The hits were 17 Utah to 15 for the Sharks, and the giveaways were 14 Utah to 13 for the Sharks. And the Sharks blocked more shots, like always, 18-12. And the takeaways, Sharks had 4 takeaways to Utah's 3. That was their second meeting. If you remember, on October 28th, Sharks got their first win of the season after a huge start to the drought. Terrible drought in the beginning. They won 5-4 from that crazy comeback with Wenberg's 3 assists and everything like that. They were down 3 goals and came back. So I guess Utah had their revenge, and I think they marked this game on the calendar to want to make up for that. So this is why it was such a big game for them. It was heated near the end. Like there's probably a good rivalry here if they play a few more games. They will see each other again on January 10th. All right, let's take a quick look at the San Jose Barracuda and how they're doing down there. So they are coming off of a loss to San Diego yesterday, but before that, they actually beat the Coachella Valley Firebirds 3-4 in a shootout win on Thursday, and on Sunday they also beat them 2-1. The whole season series has been nuts. So like Coachella Valley Firebirds have had the San Jose Barracuda's number over the years, but this year the Barracuda are actually undefeated against Coachella, and Coachella was eager to beat them, and so this was a pretty big moral victory for the Barracuda, if you want to say that. The one game before that, I think Askarov won 1-0. It was a very tightly contested defensive game. So the Barracuda, after being kind of middling for a bit, they kind of coming off a really nice hot winning streak for a while, and beating Coachella Valley was a big a moral victory, and it gives them a lot more energy. But they did lose the San Diego Gulls yesterday, and they have the Ontario Reign tonight at 5 p.m. Pacific. They will face Coachella Valley again on Wednesday, and then Friday, Bakersfield Condors. They're going to be in Bakersfield, and then Bakersfield will be in San Jose on Saturday. So they kind of have a loaded week this week, so we'll see how well they do there. San Jose is sitting firmly in the standings here. Second place, the Calgary Wranglers. Calgary is just unmovable. They have like 19 wins and 6 losses, and 26 games. They have 39 points. San Jose only has 31 points, but they do have a few games in hand to maybe catch up if they play Calgary and beat them too. So San Jose has 15 wins, 7 losses, 31 points. And Coachella is third place with 28 points, 12 wins, 8 losses. So those wins could have easily gone the other way. Barracuda will be talking about third place. So they're comfortably, nicely sitting in second place, which is nice to see. And yeah, that's where they're at there. In terms of the standings, it's pretty much the same as it always is. Colin Graff's number 1, 22 points in 23 games. This kid's going to be a stud. I feel he's going to be a Shark next year. But it's good to keep him down there right now. He's getting nice first-line center minutes. He's been just a real difference maker down there. Andrew Podorowski, 21 points in 23 games. The Patrick Kane of the AHL, I like to call him, just because of his tenure there and just all his trophies. He's won a Conn Smythe equivalent of the AHL. He's won a couple of championships. He's just a nice star to have with the potential future stars because he can teach them things of how to win. And third place, Luca Cagnoni with 20 points in 23 games. The future stud defenseman for the Sharks, everyone's hoping to see, and these have pretty much been the top 3 all season. Rounding out the 4 is Philip Biestet. He's got 12 points in 20 games. He's been doing pretty much better lately. He's just a solid kind of defensive forward that the Sharks are definitely going to want to have in the future. So hopefully he irons out into that person in the future. And Donovan Huell with 11 points in 22 games rounds out the top 5. And Ethan Cardwell, I just want to give him a mention because he's top 6 down there. He didn't play as many games. He's got 10 points in 15 games. So because of his stint with the Sharks, he actually would probably be a little bit higher in terms of the standings. What do you want from him? I call him the Zach Hyman of the AHL because he works hard. He does everything, all the right things that the coaches love to see, and he gets rewarded with some goals too. So it's just nice to see him have a decent amount of points. And like I said, if he played as many games as everybody else, he probably would have he'd probably be 4th place, honestly, but he'd be ahead of Beastet in my opinion. But yeah, they're looking pretty good. Another person to shout out is Daniel Gushin. He's been played 14 games after his stint with the Sharks, and he's got 8 points, 4 goals, 4 assists. He recently got the goal monkey off his back, and now he's got 4 goals in the last few games, so that's nice to see as well. And yeah, that's the Barracuda. So looking forward to the games. Like I said, they're going to play 4 games this week, and hopefully they can win a few of them and keep up with the Calgary Wranglers because it looks like it's pretty heated down here in the Pacific Division. Even like Abbotsford is 27 points, but they're pretty close to the Barracuda, and the Coachella Valley Firebirds are right behind the Barracuda. It could be even Colorado Eagles. They have 27 points as well. So if San Jose kind of steps back off the gas a little bit, they could find themselves falling from 2nd place to 4th pretty quickly. And finally, we're going to top off this podcast with our weekly segment, Scheduled Win-Loss. So obviously, if you're new to this and you haven't heard, that what we do is we will look at all the games that the Sharks will play for this week and kind of predict the way coaches schedule wins and losses for the week. So like they look at, road trip, usually a coach will say, we should win this one for whatever reason, we should lose this one for whatever reason, and then by this end of this road trip, we'll get 4 points. That's considered a win or whatever, a loss. So I like to just look at the teams and just see like how well they did. Last week with the Carolina Hurricanes, the St. Louis Blues, and the Utah Hockey Club, I predicted the Sharks would get 3 points. They would win 1 game and maybe lose another one in overtime. Unfortunately, Sharks only came away with 2 points. They end up beating the St. Louis Blues, which is the pleasant surprise. I predicted the Sharks would beat the Utah Hockey Club and maybe get an overtime point against the Blues. But I obviously thought the Blues would outdo them because of their hot streak. Carolina, I was right because the Sharks, they're just an inferior team to Carolina right now. But yeah, so at least I was kind of in the ballpark. The Sharks did not get the points I was hoping for, but 2 points against one of the teams isn't a bad thing. This week, however, the Sharks have a pretty tough schedule. Like they are at home. They get to sleep in their own beds. They have a little bit of a good home run from the Saturday game up until Friday before they go to Edmonton on Saturday. So anyways, we'll start with the Winnipeg Jets on Tuesday at 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Pacific. The San Jose Sharks will be at home against the Winnipeg Jets, who are a freaking wagon this year. So that is going to be a tough contest. So right now, the Jets are sitting in first place in the Eastern Conference with 45 points. Minnesota's right behind them in terms of the lead for the conference and in their division. But right now, the Jets are just unstoppable right now. They have 117 goals for, 81 goals against for a differential of 36 points. They're 22-9-1, and just everything's going right from this year. They have one of the best goalies in the world in Hellebuck, sorry. And it's a team that the Sharks probably are going to lose. I can't assume they're going to win. If the Sharks maybe catch them asleep and they're finally home resting, maybe they could beat the Jets, but we're talking about a team that only has 9 losses this season. They haven't even broke 10 yet. Meanwhile, the Sharks have 11 wins, so only have 2 more wins than the Jets have losses. So that's going to be a tough one. I'm going to say it's a scheduled loss right off the bat. In terms of the top scorers for the Jets, it's Kyle Connor with 38 points in 32 games, 17 goals, 21 assists. Number 2 is Mark Scheifele, who's got 34 points in 32 games, 16 goals and 18 assists. And I'm guessing there's no rumors anymore about trading him or any bad attitude problems now, because, when teams are winning, there's all of a sudden these problems seem to melt away. Because I remember hearing last year when the Jets were they're a very good team, but they ended up choking in the playoffs there. That people were talking about the attitude with Scheifele, and they should get rid of him, and now he's like their star center. It'd be crazy to get rid of this guy, so he's over a point a game as well. And to round that off, they have Josh Morrissey, their stud two-way defenseman, 30 points in 32 games, 3 goals, 27 assists. And fourth place is Nikolai Ehlers with 25 points in 24 games. He's actually over a point a game, which is kind of nuts. And to round out the top 5, I'm going to say Gabriel Velarde has 24 points in 32 games. One of those trades that they picked up from giving away Pierre-Luc Dubois, which was a flop for LA. So Velarde is just one of those guys that just, really works well for the Jets. He rounds out that top 6 who, they really needed. And, they're just a really stacked team. You can't really fault anyone here that you could say is kind of a weak link for this team. They're very, very well-rounded. They have great defense. They play a very playoff-style hockey team type of game. They're that old school Western Conference team where they can score goals, but they're also very heavy. They'll hit you. They'll wear down the clock. They'll do everything they can to win, and they're just that type of team. So the Sharks, honestly, I think are going to lose this one pretty handily, I would assume. And on Thursday night, they're going to be taking on the Colorado Avalanche, who are another wagon of a team. Now, they're kind of dealing with a different situation here where they have a lot of injuries. So they're not like the full team this season that they were before, but they have kind of figured things out and turned some things around here. So the Colorado Avalanche are actually sitting in a wildcard spot as we speak. They're in the first wildcard spot with 18 wins, 14 losses, and 36 points. They're 6-4 in their last 10 with a 1-game win streak. So they're coming off, like I said, in the beginning of the season, they were not doing very well with all the injuries, and they're really just their top guys were the ones performing for them in terms of Nathan McKinnon and Cale Makar are the only guys that are healthy that are getting all the points, because Makar's having a great season himself. But we'll get to that in the stats in a second. But this team couldn't really do well without that depth, and now that everyone's sort of coming back, and now that they got Mackenzie Blackwood, who I'm betting you will be playing in San Jose for the Colorado Avalanche that game, he is going to be a difference maker for this team. So let's take a look at the actual points. Who's leading in points for the Colorado Avalanche? It is number 1, Nathan McKinnon, who is a workhorse for that team. He's got 50 points in 32 games. Hasn't been injured this whole season. Like I said, the top heavy guys were kind of trying to carry this team the best they could, but they couldn't do it on their own. But he's just a freaking beast. He's got 13 goals, 37 assists. Just a true leader of this team, and making sure no one's eating any kind of sugary things that are not supposed to be eating there. Second place is Mikko Rantanen. I think he's the new underrated player of the league. It was always Barkov, but I think Rantanen, he in his own right has his own he's a superstar in his own right, but he doesn't get the credit he deserves, I think, because he's behind McKinnon and Makar. He's got 46 points in 32 games right now, so he's 1.44 points per game. He's got 18 goals and 28 assists, so he's actually leading his team in goals. He's just a beast of a guy. He's not really a physical dude, but he just, with those skills he has of being a big guy, he really utilizes them with his offensive skill. And to round out the top 3 is obviously Cale Makar, 37 points in 32 games, over a point a game defensively, and we're living in this era now where, with him and Quinn Hughes, this is Bobby Orr level of kinds of players. They can play both sides of the ice. They're great offensive geniuses. They're defensively really good. Just Makar himself, the high IQ plays he does is just so unbelievable. So that's basically your top 3 guys, and after that, there's some players that are kind of making comebacks now, like Nichushkin, but they're just guys that haven't played the whole season. So those are your big guys with the big points. Now they're coming back. Everything's kind of evening out. Middlestats, the top 4. He's 4th place with 32 games. He's got 22 goals and 22 points. 22 points in 32 games, 7 goals, 15 assists. And Samuel Girard rounds out the top 5 with 16 points in 32 games. Just a solid offensive defenseman who was touted as a little bit. He's supposed to be a little bit better, expect to be better, but honestly, you can't really complain. He's a good offensive defenseman. Considering he's behind a guy like Makar, you can't really complain to have that kind of 1-2 punch right there. So the Colorado Avalanche are going to be a wagon to deal with. They're finally starting to heal up a bit, and they're going to be hungry to get some wins against a team that they feel is a basement team for them. So I'm going to say this is probably going to be a loss for San Jose. And finally, the Edmonton Oilers. The Sharks are going to be visiting Edmonton on Saturday and it's a 7 p.m. game 7 p.m. game. 1 p.m. game Pacific. I'm trying to get my Eastern and Western right here. 4 p.m. game Eastern. So, yes, it'll be a 1 p.m. game in the Pacific of 4 p.m. Eastern. So the Sharks might be a little bit jet lagged there in terms of playing an early game, but they'll have to wake up because the Edmonton Oilers have the best players in the world in terms of Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid, and they have actually heated up a lot over the last little while. They're 8-2-0. They've won 5 of the last 5 games, and obviously they'll play a couple more games before they see the Sharks, but they'll be coming off a pretty good win streak right there and maybe continue it on. Who knows? They are 18-10-2 with 38 points. They're right now 3rd place in the Pacific Division, just 1 point behind the Kings for 2nd place and 3 points behind the Golden Knights for 1st place. And they're just a team that, like what can I say? They're stacked. They are fragile. They're beatable in some ways, but they're still kind of they're still a very good team, and you can't like stop McDavid in any way. Like if he just wants to turn on the Jets, he can have like a 6-point night easily. So it'll be very fun to see anyway. See him in Edmonton and see how the Sharks can hold up against playing some of these really good players. Honestly, this week is probably so tough for the Sharks. I'm going to pick a loss for this one. But anyways, let's go to the point leaders first for the Edmonton Oilers. So first off, it's Leon Draisaitl. He's leading points with 45 points in 30 games. Connor McDavid kind of had a slow start this year because it seems like he might have been battling an injury. He missed 3 games. So in 27 games, he has 41 points in 27 games. He has turned it around. Now he's actually over a point a game, a higher point per game than Leon Draisaitl. He has 1.52 points per game. Draisaitl only has 1.5. So, in 27 games, David has 14 goals, 27 assists, and 41 points. And rounding out the top 3 is Evan Bouchard with 22 points in 30 games, 6 goals, and 16 assists. And 4th place is Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, who, he's an unsung hero for the Edmonton Oilers. He's probably their longest tenured player on that team. And he's just first overall pick that never really lived to that hype compared to anyone else. But he's always been a solid, consistent guy. Plays a good two-way game, and he puts up a pretty good amount of points. He's got 17 points in 30 games, 6 goals, 11 assists. 5th place is Darnell Nurse, who gets a lot of heat in Edmonton because in Canada, if you play any Canadian team, you're going to get a lot of heat for not playing to a certain level that maybe your pay is expected to be, and he's kind of considered an overpaid defenseman. But he has 15 points in 27 games, 3 goals, 12 assists. And shout out to Zach Hyman, who's got 13 points in 25 games, 8 goals, 5 assists. He's not on pace to match his goal mark last year, but he's still a very solid, a type of guy who gets in the dirty areas. He knows where to score. He's a high IQ player. He doesn't have the skill of the McDavids or the Draisaitls, but he's definitely a very smart player, and he knows how to utilize his skills to get the most out of him. And when he plays with McDavid, anything can happen. He can get a hat trick in a night. You know what I mean? So just to round out the top 3 games and just to sum it up, basically, the Winnipeg Jets that the Sharks play on Tuesday, I think they're going to lose that game. And the Sharks are at home again on Thursday versus the Colorado Avalanche. I think they're going to also lose that game. And on Saturday, to round out the whole week, I think they're going to lose to the Edmonton Oilers in Edmonton. These 3 teams are powerhouses, and I just think the Sharks don't have that kind of ability to beat them. They might upset them. They might catch them asleep. That would be a pleasant surprise. But with the Sharks being a bottom team this year, I just don't see them having the horses to play a full 60 minutes against all of them, especially the way they collapse. And Winnipeg will eat that up right away. And the speed that Edmonton has is going to be able to destroy them. I think that Colorado is their best chances because of how, there's still a few injuries out there, and they're just still kind of the injured players are still kind of getting their footing back in the team. So I think that the Sharks might catch Colorado surprised, but honestly, I just think it's going to be 3 losses. So Sharks going to go 0 for 3, 0 points this week. And that's going to do it for another episode of the Teal Teardown Hockey Podcast. Thank you again for listening. If you managed to listen to the whole podcast here, this was the 9th episode. We are keeping on trugging them through. Next week will be episode 10. I can't believe we've actually gotten even this far. I hope I get to episode 100 too. I hope we get 1,000 eventually, but it's just the fact that we've gotten this far and you're listening. I appreciate you for being here, and thank you so much. If you want to get any more of my content, you can find me on Instagram at Teal Teardown Hockey and on Twitter at Teal Teardown HKY. So thank you again, and I will see you next week.